This next screencast is looking at volcanoes. We're going to start by looking at the formation of volcanoes. Now you really need to be looking at the previous screencast that we did on the 3 different types of plate boundary, because if you were talking about how volcanoes are formed, you would need to talk about constructive plate boundaries and destructive plate boundaries. However, this information here is also very useful. So the fact that volcanoes are formed when magma rises through cracks or weaknesses in the Earth's crust, and it's due to pressure building up inside the Earth. When the pressure is released, either as a result of plate movement, magma can explode to the surface, causing a volcanic eruption. The lava from the eruption then cools to form new crust, and over time that can create a volcano. So the lava comes out, cools down, creates new land, and builds up the volcano over time. Now in the exam, you could be asked to describe the effects of a volcano. Now you need to make sure that, if that question comes up, you will be able to answer it if they ask you about primary or secondary effects, or they might ask you about social effects, economic effects, environmental or physical. They might ask you things like explain the advantages and disadvantages of living close to an active volcano, which I'll talk about later in this screencast, or explain how a volcano is formed with diagrams. You may get a question like, for an earthquake or volcanic eruption you've studied, describe the short and long-term responses. Because remember, it's the causes, the effects and the responses to these natural hazards that we've been learning about. If you do get asked about the causes, effects or responses of a case study, then your case study is going to be Montserrat, which we'll talk about on the next slide. Now, although it's very unlikely that the types of volcano will come on the exam, it's always useful to have this information. Now, there are 2 different types of volcano that we're going to look at. Composite cone, so here, composite cone volcanoes, and we're going to be looking at shield volcanoes. Now, composite cone volcanoes are your stereotypical type of volcanoes. You've got your steep sides, you've got a narrow base, you've got at the bottom your magma chamber, your main vent. If you were asked to draw volcanoes, the kind of volcano that most people would draw. The examples, as it mentions here, Mount Etna, Vesuvius and Mount St. Helens are all examples of composite cone volcanoes. Now then, as it mentions here, these are the key characteristics of a composite cone volcano. As I've already mentioned, they have steep sides, it's a symmetrical cone shape, they're often high, and the reason why they're high is that they've been built up with layers of acid lava and ash. Now, this lava is very viscous and sticky. It doesn't run very far before it cools down and hardens. Then the next layer and the next layer gets built up and built up, so it becomes very high, but it's got a narrow base. Often, these kind of eruptions from these volcanoes are very kind of explosive, and the reason why is because, as it says, the sticky kind of lava that it has gets stuck within the main vent, so that the next time there's an eruption, the pressure's had to build up so much to kind of remove the plug so that you get a massive, violent eruption taking place. The other type of volcano is a shield volcano. Here's a shield volcano. Now the difference between a composite cone and a shield volcano is the shape. A shield volcano isn't as high. It also has a much wider base. The reason why it has a wider base and it's not as high is because the lava, says here, is fluid. It's quite runny, so when it comes out of the main vent, it runs a long distance before it actually hardens and solidifies into rock. Now, often when we talk about volcanoes, or we think about volcanoes, we think about the effects of them being quite negative. But as you can see on this table, there's actually positive and negative effects of volcanoes. The positive side are things like the fact that they produce dramatic scenery. That therefore attracts lots of people to the area to see the scenery, so the tourists come in spending money, so they bring income into an area. The lava and ash that's deposited often breaks down into what becomes very fertile soil, which is very good for farming and it's good for growing crops. The high level of heat and activity inside of the earth, kind of close to the volcano, can provide opportunities for geothermal energy, so putting cold water down into the hot rocks, comes back up as steam, turns turbines and you get your electricity. Of course, we kind of associate volcanoes with these negative effects. The fact that people can lose their lives, they end up dying as a result of the eruption. that the fact that ash and mud from a volcanic eruption can mix with the rainwater or melting snow, and you get what we call these lahars, which are mud flows that can cause massive damage. So it can destroy whole settlements or clear areas of woodland or agriculture. The human and natural landscape can be destroyed and changed forever. It's never the same once lava's gone over it.